This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity. This is Synchronicity.
Welcome to Synchronicity. My guest this week is Lily Cushman. She's been on the show before. You know her from a year ago, somewhere around there. I don't have like a list in front of me of when people appeared, but Lily is on the show again. She's great. I love Lily. She's a wonderful person for many reasons. But a new book has come out, and she happens to be the author of it. So that's what we talk about a little bit. But we mainly talk about mantras and what that means and how they practically relate to our lives and some of the more kind of esoteric elements of them and the etymology where mantras come from and what they may mean and what they can do for you experientially and why they've worked for Lily. That's I think a key component of this too is, and we get into this a little bit in the show, that, you know, a lot of people, there's a lot of cool mantras are cool, right? The idea that by saying some words over and over again, we can affect some type of change or use it as a tool for better understandings of ourselves or the world, that's just a cool concept inherently. But what is actually going on underneath that and why it works, and then why you're attracted to it, and your aspiration, which is one of my favorite words to come out of this conversation that I've been thinking about a lot subsequent to the conversation, is this idea of aspiration and intention and why one finds the practice that works for them. The thing they can't, I've talked about this before with artists, right? And Lily gets this too because she's a musician, but not everyone who makes art is going to be famous. Not everyone who makes art is going to be financially compensated in which they can earn a living for their art. And that's just them's the facts, the way the system's set up. However, there are, for those of us who feel compelled to create, it is exactly that. It's a compulsion. It's something that you kind of have to do. You can't not do it, is the way I've described it in the past. And this is very similar in terms of finding a healing modality or some type of formal practice that can provide some benefit to your life. And hopefully, because your life is better, the people around you, their lives are better. So mantras is that thing for Lily that provides that stability and that thing she keeps coming back to, I guess is a good way to put it, because it works. Because she didn't find this stuff because it sounded cool and she wanted some spells and prayers. I mean, maybe there's some, I don't know exactly all of her motivations. Mine probably would have been some aspect of that. But because she was like, I need something. Like, I need to find something. She was in a place, she describes, where she was very active with yoga, but was at a point where she couldn't physically do yoga. So these mantras really provided kind of a life raft in a lot of ways for her and continue to. And what's cool about this is she describes it like she didn't have to try to write the book, right? When you're living the experience, communicating it back, reflecting it back to the world, I don't want to say it's effortless all of the time, but it shouldn't feel like something I got to do this. It's a chore that I have to do. I've set myself, because then I think something else is going on with that process, and we can get to that another time. But generally, this conversation is it was a real pleasure for me to have. I love connecting with Lily, and just check out her book. So speaking of book and how to check these things out, I'm doing so. I don't know if you figured this out, but I'm kind of a dope sometimes, kind of an idiot. I don't know if it shines through fully in the podcast, but I just I'm not so smart sometimes. So I haven't really been checking my email lists or the website traffic for any of Sync Podcast or MindPod Network. And I looked the other day because I was like, I should probably look at this. And lo and behold, there's people coming. There's people doing stuff. Even CryptoSync is having people sign up. And so my apologies for people who've been signing up for this stuff and have just been getting a whole lot of nothing back from me. But one thing that I'm going to do on both of those sites is feature a book or project every month. And yes, it'll be a pop-up, but once you say no or you click on it, you won't see it until next month. So it's going to be once a month. It's going to be a book or something that I think is like, all right, I want to feature this. And I think this is a cool way because like people are coming. I can see it in the web analytics. People are coming. So I'm going to start showing something. And I think this is a nice way to promote people and projects that I think are doing cool things. So if you want to check those out, you can go to syncpodcast.com. There'll be a link to that. The first one I'm doing, I'm kicking this off with Lily's book, Mantras. It'll be up for the entire month of March. Are we in March 2019? If you're hearing this later, this was happening in March 2019. I'm sure the book's still on Amazon. You can go get it. If it's really in the future, maybe Amazon doesn't even exist. What would that world look like? Jeez. Post-apocalyptic? Who knows? Okay, so that's it. That's the episode. I gave you a really nice little recap here. Thank you to everyone who's been rating and reviewing the show. I see them tick up. It makes me feel good. That's all I got to say about that. Game of Thrones, read by Roy Dotrice. I don't have an Audible thing. This is not a promo for Audible. It's just how I've been listening to these things. Go use someone else's Audible. Duncan has one from a long time ago. Go use that to sign up and get these books. Holy shit, the books are good. Holy shit. I'm just saying, the show is good, but the show is good because they basically wrote the show with the books. Oy, oy, oy. George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm on book 2, A Clash of Kings. I'm almost done. Really, really looking forward to it. Okay, that's it. Let's get to the episode. Without further ado, here is Lily Cushman. I have a lot of things crop up when you talk. Well, let's just get started with it.
Let's get started.
Welcome to the show, Lily.
Thank you. It's so nice to be back.
We spoke a little bit off air right now, and I kind of want to just like jump on these threads here that we're talking about. A lot has happened in your life just since we last spoke.
Yeah.
I don't know what, 4 or 5 major life events. Could you talk about some of them just to give people some perspective so they can jump in and realize that like we're not being hyperbolic when we say like major events? So.
Yeah. So the last time we spoke was what? It was like 2 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, on the podcast. We've spoken briefly since then, but yeah. On the
podcast.
Yeah.
No, I mean on the podcast. I'm not going to reference all of our private conversations.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I've gone through this, kind of the last 3-4 years has been a significant amount of change in my life and a lot of tumultuous things. And, some changes in life are like real fun.
Yeah.
And then some like drag you kicking and screaming. And that's sort of been a lot of what's been happening for me. And, like I went through a really tough divorce and of a partner I'd been with for most of my adult life and taught with. And then, saw the ending of a 10-year project of the Brooklyn Yoga School. Just recently that I finally closed.
Yeah, and just tell people what that is so they know, because it's particularly awesome. Yeah.
Well, this was a yoga center that I started under really specific circumstances, which was that I wanted to be able to offer classical yoga in a way that was really accessible and open to everyone, especially in the climate of the sort of the commercialization of yoga that had been happening in the US for some years at that time. And so I opened a totally donation-based center. And at the time it was just a big experiment. I had no idea how long it would even last or work. Right. There were only 2 other places. I'm going to wait for that motorcycle to go by. It's so nice. There were only 2-3 other places in the country at that time that were.
It's a cool. It sounds like a cool motorcycle.
Yeah, no, it's that guy's definitely making up for something. There were only 2 or 3 places in the country at that time that were donation based.
Is that right?
Yeah, Brian Kest did a bunch of donation based centers.
Wow.
Bhakti Yogashala, which I very warmly refer to as BYS West because we have the same initials. And then Yoga to the People here in New York, and
Right.
had a couple locations that were donation based, but it was really, really unusual. And on top of that, I was just interested in doing a lineage school that was based on my teacher Dharma Mitra, like his transmission of classical yoga. So that was just a really specific offering, and I thought maybe at best it would work for a year. And I just somehow managed to keep it up for almost a decade, and which was a whole journey and amazing period of my life. But I just was never interested in going outside of those parameters in order to make it work. And it was real, having a donation center it's like having just like a high needs child. Like you really just have to feed it all the time and fight for it all the time. And there was never a point when like I made money. And that was one of the biggest things that was part of it, is like I literally worked for free like 8 of those almost 10 years.
Of course.
You can only do that so long. And I thought it just sort of came to a point where I was really tired.
Yeah, understandably so. I mean, you can do a benevolent act and give to the people, but I mean, if you're sacrificing yourself, I mean, it's not.
Yeah, and I was kind of ready to just start, having those resources put towards teaching again, because holding community is a very, like, that's a role that someone has to play and is really important.
Yeah.
But that's very different than a teacher. And that's really kind of where my heart was when I started it, was to teach. So so we closed last month, and it was a really beautiful closing, and so that was a huge,
huge chapter. You haven't time to fully process it, of course.
Oh, no,
it's like major. No, of course, yeah.
And then also this last year I wrote my first book, which was really just kind of, I'm going to use the word synchronicity. I don't know if you know that word.
I know it's weird, but we can look it up afterwards, and
let's look it up. Yeah. Check it out later. You might like it. But that really just showed up in my life in this, like, we occasionally have those moments where, the doors just swing open, and suddenly like, here's some goodies for you. And that really is what the book felt like. So that was, kind of a whole new opening. And then also, for the listeners out there who don't know, I also am the director of operations for Sharon Salzberg's World, and she also had a major health situation this year. So there's just been a lot of big pieces in flux, and I was like talking to I have a astrologer that I talk to every once in a while.
It's, Lily, it's so funny because I was like, I was literally going to ask the question later, like, do you have an astrologer or know any that you speak to? Just because, like, it's so clearly, like, I mean, it's like, how could you not look to some cosmic influence? Amazing.
Yeah, no, I have this amazing Jyotish astrologer, which is
awesome.
Not the Western
Vedic
method. Yeah. It's Vedic astrology. Marga, who's brilliant, and I'm going through it.
Yeah.
but it's interesting because, like, I think of astrology as something as simple as getting the weather report for your life.
Yes.
So then like, okay, do I need to wear my rain boots or can I wear some sandals? Because you still have to go through your life. Like, it's not like you're getting, a cheat out of it, but you at least know what's coming down the pipeline. You
can be a little more prepared. Bring the umbrella. Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me about this book is that it's kind of like a reverse time thing for you, because it seems like you wrote yourself a book, right, before not like obviously some of these happened before, but right now when we're talking about it, when it's out there in the world, like this is your core practice, right? I mean, this is one of them especially. And I mean, we'll get to some of the differences maybe between physical yoga and asanas and breath and that practice and sound. But I mean, it's really interesting that you've manifested this book here. So I mean, like, what do you make of this?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I originally, when I kind of entered the world of formal practice, it was initially through doing yoga, doing asana, the postures, and then eventually my first teacher, Dharma Mitra, who came about 10 years later after I had just studied on my own and had a daily practice for a long time, he kind of opened the doors up for me in terms of the broader philosophy and practices. And so that was like a full platter of
Right.
kind of all of the tools of classical yoga, which is pranayama, meditation, chanting, and then the philosophy of it, the yamas and niyamas, and then the postures. And so for many years, that I did all of those things, and that was like a period of time where I was doing upwards of 3-4 hours of formal practice a day.
Wow.
That was like my ashram time.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't living in an ashram. Yeah, but that was like I really went in. And so after that, I think I slowly just, when you do practices over time, you just figure out for yourself kind of what they do and how they all fit together and what works best for what, and in combination with your own tendencies, because everyone has their own, their own makeup, their own internal cosmology, so to speak. So, and then I just started to, after some years, I started to have some health issues, some chronic health issues, and I have a genetic anomaly in my spine that's given me chronic pain for many years.
Oh, damn.
And as I was dealing with that initially, I kind of had to, it stripped away some of the practices that had kind of been more core for me, which was more of the physical stuff.
Yeah, right.
And that's when mantra kind of came front and center for me, because I had a period of like about a year where I was essentially on bed rest and, was just kind of climbing out of this really low physical baseline. And it took me many, many years to heal my body and get back to a point where I'm like a functional person. But at that time, it wasn't like, oh, this is cool, I'm going to do this to feel better. Like it was a really heavy dose of life. And prior to that, I had been teaching full time at Brooklyn Yoga School and was in like peak physical shape. I was like a professional athlete. Like I could do any posture, I could do anything. I was teaching 25 classes a week. And then I went to the other extreme. So you might imagine what that does to your heart and your mind.
Oh my God, no, it's
a big blow.
It's
a really big blow. And just in terms of what it does to your confidence in yourself and your confidence in, life. And so mantras really helped me crawl out of that hole, because I would try all those things that I'd done before, and like it was so interesting to see, like I really was the experiment. And when you're dealing in those really dense states, dense physical states, dense emotional states, the real heavy ones, you see right away what a little pranayama is going to do or what a little meditation is going to do. Like
right.
Like it either pulls you out of the hole or it doesn't. And mantras did. It was the one thing that did. And I kind of
Mm.
jokingly, because I don't always speak about, I tend to be a little private with my health.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I don't often share all of these details, but I do tell people like, yeah, mantra's the thing I do when nothing else works. And that came
Mm.
out of this period of several years where quite literally like nothing else worked. And
Yeah.
so that started a really deep relationship for me of kind of taking another look at these things and the world of mantras, and really leaning on them for my life. And as I kind of rebuilt physically and, moved back into, being a person in the world and starting to work with Sharon and go back to
Yeah.
teaching, um, I think I was really changed. And so when I went to write the book, it was so interesting because it's just in me, and
Yeah.
because it's something that has been such a necessity for me. So it was really
Yeah.
fun and actually kind of easy to write it because this is just what I do. Like I
It's
didn't have to
real. It's
like, yeah,
authentic. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You're not like, what do I write about now? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, and the book goes through it covers a lot of territory. It's really like a handbook, but there at the very end of it is this kind of fun list of like creative ways that you can use mantra throughout your day, and
Mm.
that list, that's all stuff I do. Like
Hmm.
it's not like, oh, what's a good way to do mantra? No, like
Yeah.
those are literally things I've done for years, and I actually had to edit the list down from a larger
Yeah.
list.
That's
to,
good to have a list so long. It's awesome.
yeah, yeah, and it's so that was really cool to see because like I think for me it was kind of just a natural gradual expansion into like really integrating that practice through all of me that you don't
Mm.
notice so
Mm.
much because it happens gradually. So
Yes.
seeing something like that list was like, oh, that's cool, look at
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. You've like acquired all these
Yeah.
cool, neat little tricks
Hmm.
and skills.
Yeah.
So what is it about mantra and sacred sound and sound just in general that you think, I mean, I know you have the experiential, just like this is what worked for me, but you've been
Hmm.
doing it now, and the cool thing with the practice where it's not just like I like to listen to music every day,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
like you get this opportunity like a mindfulness practice. I mean, it is a mindfulness practice to recognize these changes both in the moment but over time, kind of cumulatively. So like,
Hmm.
what do you have any like insights into what it is about how this works or why it works that at least for you has been so like powerful as an ally?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think I'll start by saying I think it's good to just kind of define what practice is, because
Yeah.
so many people teach about different practices, and it's a little woogly sometimes how that
A
gets
little,
defined.
a little. What do you think? Yeah, a little. We'll go with a little. We'll be nice.
Yeah, we'll, we'll be generous.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's especially now in like the world of like Instagram teachers, like
Yeah.
please don't believe everything you hear. If it's like,
Oh my
please
gosh.
do not.
Yeah.
So to like go back to just like a simple core definition of kind of
Mm.
what a practice like this is for, and like why you would even do it, and what's that includes mantra, that includes meditation, it includes yoga, mindfulness, all these different things.
Yeah.
Um, is you're really training the mind, and some of them you're also training the body, but you're building this skill set with the mind. And it's not about generating like ecstatic blissful states. It's
Right.
not about trying to change the circumstances of your life with like a magic silver
Yeah.
bullet.
Yeah. Like a spell. Yeah.
Yeah. It really is learning how to work with the mind in a way that you can be more connected, that you can kind of open into a deeper place in yourself
Mm.
and interact with your life in that way. So a lot of the there in the in my book there's just kind of a broad introduction to mantra in different cultures, but then right away there's a whole chapter that's just about practice,
Right.
because you first have to kind of lay that groundwork, like what even is this, what is this for? And that's a
Yeah.
you could apply that all those same things to other practices, but um it's it's really important to set that as the context, because I think a lot of people come to a practice because they've tried a lot of other things that haven't worked, and they're
Mm.
just having a hard time in life. They're miserable. They keep having bad relationships, or they keep trying to get a certain job and they're not, or hard
Yeah.
shit is just happening and they don't know how to
Yeah.
deal with it. So, practice isn't about forcing yourself to do something. It's not about becoming someone else. It really is working with the mind in such a way that you become more you, and
Mm.
you can relax and enjoy things more, and sort of like be more human in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So there's
Yeah.
some core skills of concentration and compassion that come out of that. But that's our context.
Right. Right. For actually
So,
setting an
yeah,
intention with the practice and what its
right.
practical use could be too. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
So we don't have some bizarre expectation about what we think this is going to do. And,
Yeah.
like we're, and in the West, we're culturally trained to look through a binary lens
Right.
of good and evil. And, that's got a lot of issues with it, as I'm sure you know, but
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just the
one of them is just like, I, you know, we think of undertaking something like this to get some like cookie or some
yeah
reward at the
reward.
end of the day. And
Yes. Yes.
so it takes a little bit to kind of step out of that model and shift into another place, where it's more process oriented and less goal oriented.
And that's a really interesting point too, because it teaches you to kind of learn how to be with what is rather than expectations or
Right.
and that's I don't want that to be overlooked, because it is this idea of, well, we're doing this to get this, and if I do these things,
Yeah.
then good things will happen to me.
Mhm.
My feeling on this is that good things will happen to you, so will bad things, so will neutral things. Like, it's
Yeah.
life. This is
Yeah.
how it works. And there's some very awesome, mysterious, and things behind this, of course. But to think that we're going to be casting some like incantation and then magically
Right.
boons will appear for us, that could happen, but that might have happened anyway. So
Mhm.
using this as kind of a tool for knowing how to sit with the bad shit too is to me like, I've done so many of these episodes and spoken to so many people who do a lot of different things, modalities for healing and just overcoming this stuff. And you realize that the people who really seem to have latched on or like found something that they're really sharing authentically aren't the people who did it because they wanted to be wealthy, aren't the people who did it because they wanted more power or to be known or famous. It's the people who are basically like hitting rock bottom or bouncing off of rock bottom so many times that they're like, yeah, I found this thing and it actually helped me. And not paradoxically, but a lot of time I think these practices also just reveal who we are. That idea of what you're saying, that you kind of relax into you, like that's us. That's kind of always eternally there. And if these practices help us get there, that's like an amazing tool. So
Yeah.
I love that you bring that up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, it's interesting to see, I often then ask the question, like, well, why is it that people who hit rock bottom are the ones who can kind of move outside of their conditioning? And I think it's just so, because of the nature of how the mind works, that it's just so difficult to kind of take apart the structures of our conditioning, that it often takes something that kind of blows that all apart, which is, for people hitting a rock bottom, like really losing
Yes.
something that maybe their identity was built on, whether that's
Yes.
like a career falling apart or a relationship falling apart or um, encountering death, so, all
Yes.
those things. I think it kind of it fractures the bedrock of our identity in such a way that then we can start to ask some questions like,
Yes.
is that really who I am? And and that is one of the beauties of formal practice, is it gives us a space in which we can ask those questions,
Mm,
because it's just not built into our lives otherwise. We're
yeah.
just in motion so much of the time. So it's pretty remarkable to get in there, and I think people are often a little shocked when they first turn and look inward. It's like, whoa, this show is real fucked up. Um, but once you kind of get through some of that initial, just like, what's going on in here, to then just start asking for yourself these, really big, timeless questions of like,
Mm,
what is meaningful, and what is lasting, and what really matters to me outside of all these things I've been taught and told. And so that's a really beautiful path of seeking that comes, kind of, I think, naturally, regardless of what practice you might be doing.
right.
That's some of the best parts of it, and to just discover for yourself. And then you know, you can kind of reroute your life in a way that is connected to that. So
Yes.
when I talk about like that these practices connect you, the first thing they connect you to is yourself.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
that is not something we're taught in preschool. But that I often think of as the root of a lot of unhappiness, because people don't even know what they even really like.
Yes.
They've never even had that space to just ask those questions. So it's cool, because like you can do something as simple as like, oh, I'm gonna do some Sri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram.
Right.
And after some time, after a year, like a lot of pieces are shifting around. Um, so yeah, that's like my I'm a fan of practice. I'm a fan of
Yeah.
practice. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me too because I'm a very big Carl Jung fan and managed to get through a lot of his denser stuff on the unconscious, and
Mhm.
his stuff relating to complexes and archetypes and projection, at least for me, when my mind was still developing when I was like 16 to 18 and taking psychedelics, which is a hell of a time to read Jung, it became clear to me that like this is really true. Like our unconscious, the things below our threshold of what we process on a regular day, things we can
Mhm.
find in dreams perhaps, but that really runs our life. Like we like to think that we're doing everything. Oh, yes, I will do this and this will happen, which is why we're so often caught off guard by momentous shifts or things like that. And clearly,
Mhm.
there are events that you
Mhm.
can't see coming, right? But for the most part, I tend to think that we really do have this kind of deeper level of understanding that kind of dictates an activity that dictates kind of how our life looks. And from my own experience with mantra, since I really committed to doing the Hanuman Chalisa every day and did it for like, geez, 4 or 5 years, like every day
Mhm.
straight. And that's
Mhm.
it was probably the only time I stuck to a real practice.
Mm.
I noticed that it tended to quiet down, like you said, and I'm glad you pointed this out. It once in a while I'd get into like a very blissful and ecstatic state and it was wonderful. But a lot of the time it was just kind of clearing the space for me to like hear what was actually going on internally and then
Mhm.
letting
Mhm.
me like kind of get a glimpse, maybe not the full picture,
Right.
but a
Just
glimpse
a
of what
little
is
look. Yeah.
exactly. So
Mhm.
yeah, I it really resonates to me when you talk about that. So what practices do you do that you find to be particularly effective for you?
Well, um I have also gravitated towards the Hanuman Chalisa for a long time. And for people out there who have no idea what that word is, it's a longer prayer that is quite popular in certain circles. We're
Yeah.
kind of part of, there's a certain circle of I mean, you always find communities in different worlds of seekers and spiritual
Yeah.
communities, but um, this is all centered around Guru Neem Karoli Baba, also known as Maharaji, who is the guru to Ram Dass and Krishna Das and many others. And that has been a real home base for me for a long time, that community. And I spent chunks of time in India and Kenchi. And so the Hanuman Chalisa is kind of one of the core practices out of that world. And yeah, I think for me, I entered into the flow of that practice long before I really understood what it was. I was just really drawn to it. And when I first started working with mantras, I had this like funny aversion toward, I did not want to know what they meant. I just did not want to know.
That's kind of cool.
Literally, I would be singing like Om Namah Shivaya. I had no fucking clue what I was saying, and I loved it.
I used to do that too. Isn't that fun? I did it in college.
Yeah.
That's when I was doing Om Namah I did a whole song about it. It's like an 8 minutes. It's like one of the only songs I ever finished back then. Like 8 minutes electronic song where I took Sheila Chandra. Yeah, it's so funny. So funny. Had no idea what it meant. Didn't know
idea.
Shiva.
And I think like the most obvious reason is that I didn't want to engage that part of my mind. And but I think that for me, and especially since I am a lifelong musician, like I'm tuned into music in a certain way. I understand, the just the experiential power of the difference between a major chord and a minor chord.
Right.
And there's a whole world you can open into of how the like sonics and frequencies and vibrations, just what they do. So when you're listening to like Britney Spears' Toxic, what that does to you physiologically, as opposed to listening to like, Chopin or something. So when I was doing the mantras, like that was sort of the lens through which I approached them initially. And I have a certain trust in music because of that. So it was cool with me to just like, oh, I'm going to say this and and I would sing along with things. And I think that's kind of a fun way to approach it, actually, because the reality is mantra practice, primarily what we know of mantra practice primarily comes from the Eastern traditions. And there are plenty of other mantra practices from around the world and many different traditions, but this was the one I was drawn to. But like, it's a little weird to just like go in somebody else's culture, knock on the door and be like, hey, can I borrow this? And take it out. Because
you think it's weird, Lily. It's actually not. I think we have a mountain of evidence to the contrary that a lot of people don't think that's weird. I agree it's weird. I totally agree. But I'm with you on that.
A little weird. I mean, because like you don't know what that culture is. Like, so you're saying Om Namah Shivaya and you're saying like, I bow to the inner light or I bow to Shiva, but like, who's Shiva? And in the Hindu pantheon, there's a whole lineage. There's a whole these deities are different archetypes, and it took me many, many, many years of kind of approaching that and being with it in a way, kind of figuring out how to bring it back to my context and not just like
jumping right in and stealing it. Yeah, well, which is what happens, unfortunately, a lot of the time. It's exoticizing, other things, and it's perilous traps abound with that type of thing. But I mean, and it does take years usually to fully or not even fully, just like to start to understand the context of what this is and how you can effectively bring it back for yourself. Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah. So, and especially when you're drawn somewhere, and I think a lot of people have this experience in different ways where they'll kind of just feel at home somewhere that isn't their native environment, whether it's like, oh, I really love, Thai food or something. Like, I don't know, some of that's just like a little mysterious, why we're drawn to certain things. And so I was very drawn to, some of the Indian culture surrounding these mantras, but it took me a lot of time to unpack it. And there are a lot of things about Indian culture that I'm really not cool with, like
Yeah.
at all. So to kind of navigate that um and just, it takes time to be able to kind of understand the context of something like that enough that you can successfully translate it out into your own verbiage and your own mythology.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So so I was singing the Hanuman Chalisa for a long time, though, without knowing what the fuck I was saying or doing or what it meant or anything. And it was just something that felt really calming and
Yeah.
steadying to me.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy practice to undertake. It's very, it's like at best it's going to take you like 10 minutes to just like bleh your way through it, because it's not a simple, most mantras are short and this
Yeah.
is a longer prayer. So but I just kind of went for it. And when you find something that works, like, you don't terribly need to know why. You just
Mm-hmm.
you put your energy towards like, great, this helps, I'm going to do it. And then I kind of got more and more into the like, I would say with the other mantras, I've kind of just gone through different periods where for a long time Om Namah Shivaya was
Yeah.
was a big one for me. And later I kind of shifted into a lot of the worlds of the different goddesses.
Mm.
And now I think about all of those different mantras as like, I've spent enough time
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of them that it's like opening a medicine cabinet and picking
I
out.
was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you've taken a lot of mushrooms and you get that signal that it's like, I think I don't need mushrooms really. Like, I get it. Like, maybe I can go back at certain times if I want to, but
Yeah.
I'm good on this.
I
Yeah.
like that you kind of wanted to, gotta go back a different time.
Yeah. Put on the mushrooms.
know.
Gotta do it. Hey.
But yeah, and now, I have core practices, mantras that I do every single day, no matter what. But then I have a period beyond that that's, maybe depending on time, anywhere from like 20 minutes to a couple hours every day, where I'll fill that with the mantras that feel the most appropriate for whatever's happening in my life
Yes.
that day. If I need
Yes,
something that's like, a lot of like healing, a lot of holding, a lot of stability or expansion and clarity. And, that's what's really fun about mantras, is there's
Yeah.
kind of something for everything.
Well, and you glossed, not to cut you off, but you glossed over something that I think some people probably miss, many of my male brethren, is that you're dropping into an intuitive faculty there when you're trying to figure out like what feels right and what you should be doing. And that's something that I think can easily get lost with a lot of this, is trying to sense that out, is not something that always comes naturally to people, but is certainly a muscle worth exercising regularly, like any other practice, because you can get a lot of like wisdom and insights from doing that. Not to mention, if you can feel your way into that and incorporate it into your practice, like it can be very healing. So that's cool.
Huge. And I think, there's a lot of just horrendous conditioning for people who sit on the masculine side of the equation in our culture, who have been deeply disconnected for a long time from the inner, because of, just how they were taught to behave to get the cookie when they were kids. So and I would say there are, regardless of your gender, like that process of coming into practice and connecting with yourself, it's something to really, I think we said this before, but it's easy to gloss over. Like you said just now, that's a big deal. That's a big deal to figure out how to sit with yourself and be with yourself, because it's out of that this relationship kind of opens up, that we can trust our own experiences, that we can feel into that like gut sense of, a yes or a no or a maybe.
Yes.
And I think that, in fact, is one of the most empowering parts of undertaking a practice like this, that no one can take away from you. Like, no
Yeah.
one can tell you, like, oh, actually, that thing you're doing isn't good for you. Like, once you know, you know. No one can take that from you.
It's funny because like the Hanuman Chalisa to me is loaded for many reasons that have happened in my life, and for some reason, so I hadn't actually done it for a few months, but right before our call, I was like, I'll dust it off, see if I still remember it, and I did, and I was like, it's one of these things that even if I wanted to discard from my life, like I don't think I can, and it's
Mhm.
like it's a much
Mm.
more deeply resonant thing. It's not just that like I'll use it when it's appropriate and it'll give me this. It's like, nah, this is
Yeah.
part of you. This is
Yeah.
something that's actually happening here. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's very interesting.
Yeah. So, and I think like it's fun to kind of try things out on that level, because of course in our culture we're in such a place of kind of immediate, goal orientation.
Yeah.
Um, and so the lens through which often people are assessing things is like, does this make me feel a certain way right now?
Right.
And the reality is there's different levels on which a practice or mantra practice in particular is going to affect you. And some of them are working on such a deep level that the even the means through which you're assessing whether it's
Mhm.
working for you is being transformed. So so that's kind of cool, because like I think at first it's like, yeah, you're looking at obvious things, and you're not going to keep doing something that doesn't feel good enough, right?
Right.
But once you have some confidence in the practice that it is having that kind of effect, I think it's really helpful to kind of put down the assessment for some time and just say, like, okay, I'm going to try this for a month, and then see what's up, see what's changed, see what's different. And you use yourself and your life as the lab to really
Yeah,
experiment with.
you're empirically testing
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
you're testing it. And the reality is the place you're looking for those results is not inside the practice. You're looking at your life. So that, I think, is one of the biggest issues with any of our assessment tools, is like we're
Yeah.
looking at that 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's not where you're going to see
Yeah.
it.
Right. Of course.
You're going to see it when you lose your shit at the post office. Like that
Oh, man.
100% is the place to go if you want to see if your practice is working. You go, especially if it's during the holidays. Like
Well, in New
that's-
York, I mean, it's like it's the next level experience. It really feels like
Oh,
a
yeah.
layer of hell. It is just,
fully.
I remember acutely.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, we'll get into Speculationville a little bit, but what do you think is happening on either a physiological, a psychological, a psychic, emotional level when we use mantra as a practice?
Yeah.
What is the mechanism there? Yeah.
Okay, well, the first thing I'll say is that mantras are different from regular words. And on the outside, to see someone reciting a mantra, it's very deceiving, because it just looks like, maybe you're singing, or maybe you're just chanting something, maybe you're
Right.
speaking it. But what's fascinating is it isn't actually the same thing as just saying like flaxseed.
Right.
Om Namah Shivaya has something else going on.
Yeah.
And one of the there's a whole chapter in my book about scientific research around mantra practice, which
Cool.
covers a variety of things. But one of the studies I call the Santa Claus study, which speaks to this very thing. And in the study, they did a comparison between using a mantra versus using a regular word. And so they had people, this is a little complicated, but I'll try to explain it in the best way. So they had people look at a neutral photo and then a difficult photo. And then they had people do those two things saying a regular word. Now, why they chose the word Santa Claus, I don't know exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because honestly, that's a pretty loaded word.
I was gonna say, like, it's culturally super loaded. Like, I'm Jewish, it's even loaded for me. Like, I mean,
Yeah. And so then they would look and see like what happens in the body, in the brain, when they say Santa Claus looking at something neutral or something that's difficult. And the idea being that, when you see a picture, like the mind thinks it's the same as though you're in a situation that's either neutral or difficult.
right.
So they do that with Santa Claus. They see, they get their baseline. And then they have the same process, but reciting a mantra. And they see something very different happen. They see actually that for the neutral photo, the same thing happens as when someone said Santa Claus. But in the difficult one, when the people said the mantra instead, the body and brain did the same thing as when they looked at the neutral.
The neutral. Yeah.
That is fascinating because what the fuck is that? What does that mean? Like, we can say certain, huh? This is so interesting to me. And
Yeah.
so I think part of it is hard to really understand because,
of course.
we don't know what the fuck is happening. So I'm going to try to stop swearing.
No, you can swear as much. Are you kidding
I have
me?
total
Every
potty
single one
mouth.
of these episodes is explicit. Like, they're all from my intros.
No, but once I get on a tear, I'll really be like a sailor. So,
Yeah. You should be around here and see what's gonna happen to my kid.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah.
But I think that's really interesting because that makes no sense in the normal framework. Like, why would one word do something different? And presumably a word people have different meaning attached to different words, but that's just fascinating. So when you go back to the culture around Sanskrit mantras, which is the book focuses on Sanskrit mantras from the Hindu tradition. So I kind of went back deep in that framework to look at how they explain the difference. And the Hindu world has a lot of, like many religions and many cultures, if you go back and look at some of the original source mythologies, it's often super fantastical and makes no sense in terms of modern science. But basically in that culture, they feel like mantras are that they were sung by sort of the how do I say this? What's the best way to say this? In that world, it kind of sources back to the creation mythology. Right. And in that creation story, a mantra plays a very key role in the actual formation of the universe, which is the sound of Om.
Yes. And just to draw the parallels in the Abrahamic religions as well, right? Yeah. Those words, Yahweh, those things are considered, and the voice. First, there was the voice, the sound. The sound was God, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, so in the Hindu tradition, it's thought that the creation of the universe sprang forth from almost like the friction of the vibration of the sound of Om. Yes. And from that, all of life came. So where does Om come from then? So that's one thing to think about. And then also in that world, there's a whole idea that the universe was kind of dreamed into existence by these ancient seers, these ancient rishis, they're called. Right. And that they were kind of so dialed in that they would hear these mantras. And so that doesn't explain anything to us, obviously. That's fascinating, but it doesn't quite explain, what's the difference? And I just kind of love that because there's got to be something there. I mean, this is the story like of Om that's like over 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
They're saying that Om is like the first written record of Om is older than the woolly mammoth.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
very old. So I think that's always interesting when something's stuck around as long as that, because it adds some veracity to it for me. Because like if it wasn't true, why would people keep, because every time it gets sort of passed through another generation, they're going to take another look, be like, really?
Well, this is like the age old jumping off point or like staying on board point for a lot of people, which is like my dad is a really good example. My dad believes in a lot of wild stuff, but he jumps off the train sometimes with Buddhism and Hinduism because it seems so fantastical. Like, how could these people know it? Whereas when I bumped up against that, when it was Advaita Vedanta or Tibetan Buddhism, I dig in deep. I'm like, how are they saying this is real? Like, where is this coming from? Like, who is this being tracked back to? In not that different of a way. Like, if I'm seeing like a political ad or something like that, like, who's funding this? Where is this coming from? Like, who's the originator? Like, I want to know, like, because this is how you develop your powers of like discerning.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I personally, and I think a lot of listeners of this podcast will probably be like us, where it's like, I am willing to accept some of these things, even not fully knowing every intricate aspect of it, because like I don't think the Dalai Lama is conning us. Like, I just don't. It doesn't add up to me. Like, it's like weird. It's like a really weird long con. I do. I mean, it's good that you bring that up, but I also think that like Om and these kind of deep mythologies that are associated with these, like there's resonance there for a reason. Yeah,
and I'm kind of playing devil's advocate because I think that helps people approach mantra practice in a way they wouldn't otherwise, because even though I'm like fully into it, totally. I and after working with students for so long, like I see that not everybody feels right at home there. So is there a way to access this as a practice, without those elements? And I think the answer that I kind of land on of like a more palatable response to like, well, what is the difference between this word and that word, is that mantras have this kind of supercharged element to them, where it activates certain things when they are repeated with concentration, with intention. Something else kicks in. And I love this example that I've heard Krishnadas use for many, many years, which is that you don't see that many enlightened pop stars, musicians who go on stage night after night after night singing the same song hundreds of thousands of times.
Very interesting. Yes.
They're repeating it over and over.
Over and over.
And the hook, they're, at least in one song, they're saying like, like, thank you next, like whatever, 30 times in one song. And are they getting these other benefits? And most of the time they seem super duper fucked up to me. So that is very interesting, because that's probably the closest next example there is to someone who's repeating a mantra as a word. So it's like there's something else going on. There's like a activation. And I would say from my own personal experience that I've gotten to the point where I can feel a qualitative difference between what that activation is about. So they kind of, it's like they carry different frequencies in them, so to speak. And I think the fun part for people is to find that for yourself and see if that's true. I mean, that's always how I introduce practice to people. It's like, don't believe me, like check it out for yourself.
Your experience.
So
and that's kind of the fun, I think, of life, or one of the qualities that we get to enjoy, is like finding, whether it's a mantra, a person, a community, an interest, a passion, like you get to find what's for you. Like that's awesome. That's really cool. It would totally suck if it's 1984 and we're all wearing suits of the same color. Like no one wants that. No, and I mean, I think that's really important too. And it also opens up or invites people to be a little more patient with some of these experiences and modalities we're talking about, just because you may have to move through a few of them. I mean, to this day, the only two mantras that have stuck with me firmly are, like I said, the Hanuman Chalisa, which is longer, and Om Mani Padme Hum. Those are the only ones that really stuck with me, and they don't stick with me because I think there's some magical divination prayers, but because when I chant them or say them, it qualitatively calms me down in situations. And it's not all the time I do that when I'm stressed out, but when it does feel like it bubbles up and percolates up, like it does have an experience quality to it that is undeniable. Like you can't trick that. It's very interesting.
And I think the more you do it and like throw down at different times in your life where there's different stakes at hand, you start to trust it more and more. And certainly for me, when I like really went down and my, had this like hard health stuff, the fact that could pull me out was really meaningful to me, because it wasn't like, oh, this makes me feel calm and like I'm having a normal life right now. Like it was hard. And none of the other practices had the same effect. So, since that time, and even in this past year since, I last came on the podcast, I really look to mantras as a pretty consistent support for my life. And just even when I know something's coming down the pipeline, like, 2 months ago, knowing that I would be releasing a book and closing the studio, I knew it was going to be hard on a lot of levels. I knew it was going to be emotionally a lot. I knew that it was going to be taxing in different ways. And I wanted to be able to move through that period kind of bolstered. And so I undertook some practices beforehand that took me through, and I'll do cycles of, let's say, 40 days. Where it was like, okay, we're going to bolster. You're going to set up more of a perimeter for yourself, psychically, energetically, emotionally, so that your heart is protected, your mind is protected, your body is protected, that you have some deeper sense that you can lean into, especially when it's those big identity pieces moving in your life. Like those shifts happen and they rock us the most. So to have something else to lean into when those shifts are taking place,
it's like a cushion.
Such a good crutch. It's amazing. And then like when shit got even harder this past month, I was really, really glad that I had that and just like kept reaching to it. And so that's beautiful. And part of that too is, I think, letting our aspiration to be able to walk through life in a open-hearted way, in a calm way. Like there's a lot of power in that, and people often overlook that because they don't necessarily understand its magnitude. But even having an aspiration, that means something, and that's such a like a core barometer that we can live our life by.
It's interesting because I don't think I use that word enough. Aspiration. I think I use intention a lot, but you can have bad intentions. It's like a popular turn of phrase. I mean, so aspiration. I mean, hopefully people aren't aspiring. I'm Ted Bundy. I'm aspiring to be the best serial killer, but for most people, aspiration will probably have some like positive quality embedded in it for yourself or for the world. And that's, I'm going to start bringing that into my lexicon a little bit more. It's wise.
Well,
that's cool.
I think of aspiration as orientation. And that's really essential, because even if you're way down in the deep end of the pool, if you know what your orientation is, that you know you want to turn around and come back, like that can be the whole movement of your life. And that's really different because like on the outside, you're down in the deep end of the pool, but if you're aspiring to be a certain way, let's say your orientation is kindness, That doesn't mean you're going to not lose your shit at the post office, but it's going to change the way that moment happens. And maybe you lose your temper, but you apologize after, or
Yeah.
you get frustrated, but you don't stay frustrated quite as long because
Yeah.
you're looking towards kindness. Now, if you're looking towards something else, you're going to move in that direction too.
Yes.
So that's the beauty of aspiration, I think of. And I think often, when I'm counseling students who are going through really hard things, or feel disempowered to make the changes they want in their life, I point them to that, because it is actually a big deal, and that we can have some authority over our lives, even if it's a small little step of like, okay, I'm going to be gentle with myself today because things are just real tough. I'm going to do one little thing to be kind to myself, and maybe I'll find one other person. That's like taking your power in your own hands. Even if you have a really big mountain to climb, it will get you there eventually.
Well, I was going to say, like, what if you were your student, which you are, what would you be telling yourself, having gone through especially this acute period of transition, whether it's, you want to say, the last month or year? Like, what would you say to yourself to do this, to get through this? Or
Well, one of the things that came to me as in this past month, which involved a lot of sleep deprivation, among other things.
That's effective in its own way. Yeah.
But I had this intuition that if I could relax my body, that I would somehow make it through. And so I texted a couple of my closest friends, and I asked them to text me the phrase, relax your body, whenever they thought of me in the day. And this was in like the most acute, like in the hospital, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And what that did is it triggered a softening in me whenever I would read it. And
what a cool idea. That's so smart.
This was a whoa. This was a big whoa for me, because every single time, and so I asked three of them, and so I got a lot every day.
I was gonna say, I bet. I mean, like, it's cool.
And it was, once I saw it, I knew what to do. I knew, like, okay, and the goal was that I was trying to be gentle with myself, and it was like, you have to walk through this. This is a lot. You've not done this before, so you don't know how to do it. It was all these things, scary and frightening and exhausting, and yet if I could just be gentle, that was coming back to my orientation of, and so it was pretty powerful for me, and honestly, like, saved me a lot, because part of it too is just on a practical level of resources. When you can relax your body, it's like, you run a little less on your adrenals. You kind of like, just in terms of physiological stuff, it pulls you down a little from the flight or fright
fright
or fright response. And so your body's like a little, it's able to function a little better. And so relax your body is like my new favorite thing. And
I like it. I like it a lot. I probably am going edibles, but you think your idea is a little bit better. So, both, whatever suits fancy
each
there.
her own.
Yeah, there you go. Lily, I mean, I feel like we could talk for a lot more.
I know,
like
it's so good.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna wrap it up.
Yeah.
Gotta go get the kids soon.
Yeah,
but I want to ask you my ending questions.
Oh, okay.
Whoa. Before I get there, hold on. I know it, but can you just say the name of your book? There'll be links, of course, but we haven't even mentioned the name of your book.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
It's called A Little Bit of Mantras. and it's available everywhere that books are sold. I walked into Barnes and Noble's a few days ago, and it was on like
Amazing.
the first table when I walked in the door. It was crazy.
That's so fucking cool.
Yeah, and the book comes with a whole practice companion, which is a really robust resource. There's 13 mantras in the book. For each one, there's the mythology, there's application, and then in the practice companion, there's all these resources so you can learn how to draw the mantras. There's audio to learn the pronunciation. There's even fun like screensavers for your phone, things
Oh,
like that.
awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Is there a reason you picked 13 for the amount?
That is another podcast. The answer to that
Okay.
question.
Amazing. We're setting it up. That's called a cliffhanger. We call in the biz. Let's get to the ending questions here.
Okay.
What is your favorite color?
Oh, well, I kind of go for like a blue turquoise these days.
Yeah, it's a good
Mhm.
one. What's your favorite number?
I would say it's kind of a tie between 108 and 3.
Oh, very cool. Well, those are good things to be tied, to be honest. Those are really good ones. What is your favorite animal?
Oh man, that's so tough. I mean, it's probably a cat, but I send like hundreds of cat memes to my friends every day on it.
Cats are really awesome. I like them on Reddit. There's some really good stuff on cats on Reddit.
Oh yeah.
Last question. Even though you've been sharing like dozens of them throughout the episode, what's a practical tip that's helped you in your life that you could share with people listening?
A practical tip for what?
Anything. That's the beauty of the question. Duncan went with socks. He's like, get good socks. That was literally his tip.
Duncan, so
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Let me ponder that for a sec. Let me ponder.
I set you up with the simple ones and then hit you with this. That's how I do it.
I think a nice one is to just give yourself permission for whatever it is, for being yourself, for whatever it is you want to do, to eat the cookie, to get the nice socks. Give yourself permission. Yeah, give yourself permission.
That's really awesome. Lily, thank you so much for coming on.
Nice.
And I'm sure things will just be getting better and better. Your astrologer can confirm this. Look it up. Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Really, really great.
All right, lots of love. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening past the music. Lily Cushman. You can find her at lilycushman.com. Go figure. You can also get her new book, A Little Bit of Mantras. You can find that on her website, on Amazon. You can also get it now, like I said, featured book of the month, syncpodcast.com. It's there. Go check it out. See if it works. Tell me if it doesn't work. It should work. Lily, always a joy. You might have heard mentioned in the episode, Sharon Salzberg had some medical issues last month, and she's doing better. It was a very harrowing experience for everyone, Lily included, but send lots of meta, loving kindness, prayers, thoughts Sharon's way. I know a lot of people think those things don't matter. They matter. So do that maybe before your meditation practice or as a prompt to meditate when you think of Sharon. There you go. That's it for this episode. I'm about to actually jump on another podcast right after I'm finished recording that. So we definitely have episodes for the next few weeks of cool people. I can attest to that because I know some of them are about to happen very shortly. All right. I'll see you next week.